Hey everyone, and welcome to the webinar. My name is Pat Reinhart from Conductor, and today we are here to talk about AEO for the CMO, strategies, MCPs, in the Agentic Era. I lead the services organization here at Conductor. Thank you so much for joining me. And today we have the co-founder of Nective, the great Chris Long. Chris, how you doing, buddy?
Great, Pat. Thanks so much for having me, man. This is awesome.
Oh, good. Yeah, no, I'm really excited for this conversation. I've been following you for a very long time. You do amazing studies, so really appreciate you being here today. So today is a conversation. So I am going to take I'm going to take slides down so you can just see me and Chris. And ultimately, like what we're going to talk about today is a few things, right? And I think the best place to start is the shift that's happening right now. And I'm not going to give like a whole history of what's happening. If you're here, you probably know that, AI search is a big deal. But today, like a lot of what we're going to try to get to is the shift from like how people are using software today to more of like a search as a service. Like you can think of things like Claude and ChatGPT. It's like, wow, you're just chatting with these things, but they are doing things for you, and how you can feed data into that. And I think one of the best questions, like the first questions I think we should discuss is, it's like there's so many people that know that we're shifting into, kind of like like the era of agentic search. And the first question is, what does that look like, and how do we prepare? Chris, do you want to kick it off?
Yeah, I mean, I am very bullish in terms of like agentic search and like how that's going to shift things, right? And I think like Google not too long ago was like our vision is to turn Google search into an agent manager, and like I really don't see a way which they've given us evidence to go to the contrary, right? Like they are shifting the search much more toward like I would say task completion as opposed to like actual like manually going through traditional search results, right? So it's like I believe that's the direction they're going to go to. And like with ChatGPT, like that's where we've already been, right? Like ChatGPT, when I do something like deep research, like it counts how many searches it does like in that time, and it's like in 5 minutes it will conduct like 250 searches, right? So even with that, like the shift to like task completion is already happening. So it's like I think more and more we're going to see that like we're going to have agents kind of like execute search on our behalf, right? And people, I think maybe marketers were early adopters, right? But I think Google's shifting the search engine that way already. And especially as they get more aggressive with like rolling out AI mode and AI mode type features, I think they're going to shift people who are already in the ecosystem to learn that they can search that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you. I think that the interesting part is the task completion part is the most interesting part to me, right? Because number one, I use it every single day. All the things that I used to hate to do, I don't have to do anymore. Thank you, Claude. I'm also in a weird, somewhat situationship with my Claude account. I feel like I talk to it like a person. Like we have, my wife's a little bit worried. But ultimately, I think that I see like the new ways of being able to do things like our MCP server, and just other companies using MCP servers to feed their data directly into LLMs, and instead of having to log in to a software or and do something manually, you can literally just query you can just query the data and you can interact with it, which to me is way more conducive, in my opinion, to more people's natural workflows than stopping, going into a product, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's going to make this way more accessible to a lot more people, like the data that we have all been holding on to for so long. And I think it's ultimately going to be a good thing, not just from a productivity standpoint, obviously from a productivity standpoint, but really just from, people being able to use search data more across organizations, which I think has always been a challenge, always been a challenge for, I think, this industry in general, is getting other players on board. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's a great point. Like in terms of like I haven't even thought about it from that way, to be honest. Like data democratization,
Yeah.
right? It's like literally, it's like if you can connect that technology, it makes it accessible to everyone. Someone who's like, oh, I wasn't sure really how to log into that platform before. I wasn't sure where we had to log in, or like how to use all the visuals. It's like everyone is probably at some point going to, whether it's multiple systems or they're a Claude user, ChatGPT, whatever, they're going to use those systems. And if they understand the concept of MCP connection, it does make that data much more accessible across departments. That's a good point I haven't thought of.
100%. And like for CMOs, listening, like that's really, like what you have to think of is how do you get this data in the hands of all of your teammates, not just your search team or whatever they're called at your organization. And so speaking of data, right, Chris, like you've done so much work on like your fan out research has done really like is really fascinating. I've read through it multiple times. And like if you're a CMO, right, like why is this more important in 2026 than like traditional keyword volume or things like that? Can you explain it to us?
Yeah, so for the many people might or might know, but the concept of a fan out query is instead of me just doing a search and search for your standard best running shoes search, right? AI systems and Google included with their AI mode is going to fan it out, right? So they might search best running shoes 2026, Nike versus Adidas 2026, right? They're going to take that and translate it. The reason it's important is because this is the language of AI search, right? Like fan out queries will directly tell you how AI engines are searching. And there's a lot of really interesting data, right? Like Zero Interactive did a study on this, and it's like they found that like when they looked for like fan out query and like compared that against like traditional search volume, like 80% of them had zero search volumes. These are not queries that people are actually doing, right? But it's still important to understand the language of AI search. So it's like when we did our data studies, right? We found that like ChatGPT is generally doing about 2 to 3 fan out queries. I think GPT 5.4 is changing that, so we'll have to redo it. Like we're seeing like strings as long as 10. Google's doing about 10 different fan out queries for every single prompt. So that means if you were traditional keyword tracking, right? Like 10 queries you were tracking, like a system of 100 queries turns into 1,000. So it's important because people are going to have to understand, like at scale, how are these AI engines searching? What patterns are they using? What types of, like, what are they looking up against the product? Are they looking up accrediting organizations? Like you have to dive deep in the data and understand how AI is searching, because then you can better learn, like, okay, what are the strategies I need to do to actually connect to be visible?
Yeah, no, and it's really interesting that because I don't think like a lot of people talk about this, you know what I mean? Like they talk about like fan out and all that stuff, but I don't think they think about it in that way, you know, and how it can actually be useful to their day-to-day campaigns and their programs, right?
Yeah, correct. It's like I think it's really takes it down from like, hey, how do I like analyze against a single entity to like it is a much more complex relationship. Like in ChatGPT is especially fascinating if like people ever have time to play around with the data. It's like you'll literally see it like go and like start comparing brands. Like it'll go like right Mailchimp versus this provider versus this provider, right? And it'll just string down. So it's like super interesting to see how it's searching, and then like that can inform your like entire content strategy, right? Or like where should you be getting reviews? Like really interesting one was like for a cybersecurity client, we found that like Gartner is like a really big deal for them, right? It's like, and if you're not mentioned in the Gartner reviews, it's like you're going to have a harder time showing up. So that informs like not only their on-site strategy, but like their off-site as well.
Yep, absolutely. And so let's move on from that topic and let's talk about like some scary questions that people are asking themselves really about their programs and the evolution of their teams, right? Like people like probably are sitting there asking themselves like, what am I supposed to tell my board about like ROI when it comes to AI, right? Or who do I hire next? What skill set should I be thinking of? And I think like one question that comes to mind that I hear a lot is like, what is one question that marketing leaders are somewhat scared to ask their teams right now about AI readiness? And I can tell you for me, I think it's about their skill set, right? Like and being honest about their skill set and saying like, hey, listen, like, like we're moving into this new world. Like who feels ready or feels comfortable with using LLMs or using, and using them to get day-to-day workflows done. I've seen that most CMOs and, and just other marketing leaders in general, they're starting with upskilling their teams versus going out and hiring. Not that they're not hiring. There's certainly a lot of jobs out there in search, that's related to AI. But even here at Conductor, we started making people take an AI test, like to make sure that they're kind of up to snuff. Because Seth, our CEO, and rightfully so, is very bullish on this, saying, hey, listen, we need that people who are AI literate coming into the organization. And I think a lot of marketing leaders are afraid to ask that question because, number one, they may not want to know the answer, or number two, they're afraid of kind of upsetting their teams. But what do you think about that?
Yeah, and that's a good point. It's like, and I think Kevin Indig recently did a study where it's like he found that like jobs that like I think he looked at SEO jobs and jobs that had AI in the description somewhere, not necessarily in the title, paid like 20% more. So if you're out there and wondering, like, should I be in like investing in this? Like, the answer is yes. The data is actually showing that these jobs I pay more, right? But I would say, yeah, it's like, I would say this is like probably teams maybe are scared to like realize where their current state is in AI, and that maybe like a lot of organizations aren't as AI literate. It's like, I think a lot of people are scared to admit that, but it's like,
Yep.
I've been talking with different team members in house, and that it's like, I think it's like people aren't, it's like, it's easy with all the hype, like to think everyone's super far along, but like the case is not everyone really is. It's like many
Yep.
people in their AEO programs are like really in kind of the very, very early stages. So it's like, I think there's a fear in terms of like, hey, we should be farther along than we are. But in reality, like a lot of people are figuring out like, how do I structure things, right? Like, who do I hire? How do I structure an AEO team? Who leads it, right? I think people need to be honest about that, but like, just realize it's okay to start from zero. This is something that like a lot of people are figuring out as we go, right? I'm curious with like kind of like who you've worked with, like how do you see teams successfully like setting up like AEO like teams?
Yeah, and what you said resonates so much with me because going especially into larger organizations, right, is that most people feel that they're very behind, but they're not really. Most like most AEO campaigns are in the very early stages, right, and everyone's still trying to figure out like what to do, what the framework is. They're just getting data that they trust now because technologies have caught up. And I think that like I agree with you that a lot of people are putting unnecessary like kind of pressure on themselves to say, hey, listen, like we have to be, like we have to be like years and years ahead of everyone. But the truth of the matter is that a lot of people are still learning this, right? And most people have not even used, like AI beyond a few conversations in ChatGPT. And I don't think that companies or leaders should, honestly, should put an insane amount of pressure on their teams and say like, hey, listen, if you don't do this, you're going to be fired or something like that, right? It's more like, hey, listen, let's all come together and learn. And that's what I'm seeing mostly across organizations that I'm working with, is that they're giving people the room to breathe and learn, but they are telling people that they have to learn. And I think that as people upskill on AI, their value in the market only goes up. Like I see this as one of the greatest opportunities for people in search to slingshot their career ahead by 5 years if they can go into these bigger companies or even any company that's looking for it and say, hey, listen, here's how you set this up, right? It's not that much different than setting up a traditional organic campaign. You just have to think about it a little bit differently, you measure it a little bit differently, but ultimately like the AI skill set piece is going to be, I think it's going to be just like having like a college degree, right? It's going to be like a box check on resumes very soon, that you're going to have some level of AI literacy to even like get to an interview for a job.
100%. Yeah, it's like an uproar. You already see it on like probably.
Yep.
I think we're swayed because it's like we're working with like a lot of like B2B tech companies, so it's like those companies are more aggressively pushing for it. But it's like, yeah, a lot of like their job applications, like AI is considered, like AI skilling is already considered something you need to have coming in, right? I think something that's interesting, and this isn't the concept of like AEO versus SEO, but more like being an SEO versus being good with AI. It's like something that's maybe even scary for a lot of people. Is like, it's an entirely different skill set, right? You could be a great SEO, right? But like
Yep.
being really sophisticated with AI is like, it's different than that. Like, it's like less about like, how do I create the best piece of content, or how do I go out and get backlinks? But it's like, how do I create a system
Yep.
where I give AI all this context, right? And then the output comes out something that's like usable pretty consistently with like minimal feedback, right? That's an entirely different skill set
Whole
than
different
being
skill set.
good at SEO or any other performance marketing, right? So it's scary. It creates opportunity, but it is something that's different.
And I think that, and it's a great point, because I think it's something that a lot of folks in our industry have to recognize, is that it's not just about like writing great content, optimizing the site. It's about building a system, right? And even, for in traditional, SEO, like I've always said, the best programs are mechanical, right? And that people have these flywheel processes that just make things move forward. AI is accelerating that at such a pace, but people really need to recognize that if you're going in and someone's asking you, hey, like, what should I do? You can't say, oh, we should go build these backlinks, or, oh, we should go optimize these pages. You have to say, we need to build a system around this. We need to engineer a system, for this, to make sure that we can keep up with the pace of everything.
Yeah, it's like I think the people who are the systems builders, right, are going to be the ones who like end up thriving, right? Because like I do think it's becoming a little bit devalued, right? People who are looking like, hey, I'm looking at one page at a time, right? Or like one
Yep.
link at a time, whatever it is, right? It's like that is something that like a good system, right, should be able to scale out for you. And maybe it won't do it perfectly, but right, if it gets it 80, 90% of the way there, the people architecting those systems, right, content engineers, whatever they're being called, right, I think I am bullish on that as like a career choice, because I think there's going to be a lot of organizations who are like, hey, we know we need to be using AI. We're unsure, right? It's like, and we've tried it, and maybe we've upskilled some team
Yep.
members we haven't. We're looking for people to come and run those systems. Someone who feels confident in like how to architect something like that, right? As opposed to like, hey, looking at a page one by one.
Yeah, and you actually just mentioned content engineers, right? So this is, like the titles are starting to shift wildly for folks, in this. Like we even here at Conductor, we have, we have a content engineer, and what that is for anyone wondering is that it's not someone that just comes in and writes content. It's someone who's coming in and building a system to generate content and have it edited and have a human in the loop, with it. And I think that that's like a really big shift, for folks from a headcount standpoint at where they're really looking for folks aren't just like our companies, excuse me, aren't just looking for someone who has this one skill, right? They want someone to come and be like, hey, listen, how can we orchestrate an entire system around this? And I think that's really, again, a tremendous opportunity for people that want to think a little bit outside of the box and say, hey, listen, like I've been doing this for a long time. I know I can build a system around this and I can work with all these different teams. But I think it's going to significantly impact the way that hiring happens, not only within our industry, but with across organizations and different marketing functions. The ideas of things like not an analyst, but like a content engineer, people who build systems, because the analyst is Claude, right? Like Claude's your analyst, and you need people to control those agents.
Yeah, and you need someone. It's like I think you need someone who understands like the steps that the system needs to go. And then I think another underrated value is like someone. My co-founder is really good at this. It's like someone who like understands all the disparate data sources
Mhm.
you can connect to under that one system. Like that's another entire skill, right? It's like, oh, we're creating a content pipeline process. Well, great. Like, are we including like different data sources like from things like Conductor, right, to pull into that content, to pull into that, and like, oh, maybe like sale, we have like sales data over here we can pull into that process too. I think there's like different disparate data sources that like, you can pull into these systems. That's another kind of like aspect of the engineer is like knowing
Yep.
which data sources are at your disposal and how you can pull them in.
And I think it comes down to people just like they're looking for creative thinkers, right? Like people who are curious, and people who have really adopted, these tools that, in my opinion, I've said this on a million webinars, is that I believe AI is the greatest productivity tool that has ever fallen in my lap. And people who know how to use it responsibly and correctly and are creative thinkers, they're going to be the next wave of founders, CEOs, CMOs, et cetera, because they're the ones that are going to be able to kind of, kind of herd everyone in the right direction, and and using these these agentic analysts, for lack of better words, to help them do that.
For sure.
And I think and so we're speaking about hiring, we're speaking about people at the organization, but what I've heard, some horror stories already, but nothing too bad, like CEOs or leaders mandating that like you must use this, right? Like you must do this, right? Like you must adopt this, right? And we touched on this a little bit before, but like for me a big question is always just like what's like the biggest mistake leaders make when trying to do that? In my opinion, it is not giving people time to learn and not giving people time to breathe a little bit. Everyone's very overwhelmed right now. You can see it across the industry. Everything's moving so quickly. And then all of a sudden your boss comes in and says, you have to learn how to use Claude and Cowork and code in the next 2 weeks or else you're done here, or something like that. And I've heard stories like that across multiple organizations of leaders doing that. And the problem to me with that is, number one, it stifles curiosity and also stifles creativity, because now they're just like, my God, I just need to learn this to a certain degree. And then they're going to wind up hating it instead of like it naturally coming to their aid and then realizing, wow, this makes my job a lot easier. So I worry when leaders do that, like you must do XYZ. Like I think everyone should be encouraged to use AI. And there is, of course, like the areas where you really should be using it. Like if I walk by a desk and I see someone writing title tags manually, like obviously like stop that. That's a ridiculous waste of your very talented time. But I think that there's the right way to do it, which is encourage people to do it, give them space to learn. And there's a wrong way to do it, being like, hey, I'm going to time you, and say, hey, you got 2 weeks to learn this and XYZ. But what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's like I think a big thing I see is like people shoehorning like AI just for the sake of it. Like it's like I think that's like use it just to use it, right? Where it's like everything should have a goal, right? It's like it shouldn't be just do it. It shouldn't be do it just to make this faster, even if the output isn't very good. It should be we have this business need, right? We spend 10 hours a week creating content. We believe that if we come in and like create the system, we're going to knock that down to 2, right? Like that's like a legitimate business goal. But it first comes with defining the process that you're looking to fix, as opposed to saying, hey, we need to go and be using AI just wherever we can, right? Like that is where it becomes indistinguishable. I think that truly like good organizations are like kind of forming their larger organization around, I guess, AI as a whole. They're not looking at it as like separate tasks, but they're looking at it as like, hey, how can it inform the organization systematically? I think it's another different way of kind of thinking about it too.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like I truly believe that organizations that encourage folks to use it, and again, give them a little space, but because eventually you're going to have to use it, right? Like eventually it's like, hey, listen, you got to use this, because it's detrimental to you, to the individual at some point. But I do think that the right way to do it is encouragement and giving space for learning. Like my team, for example, someone on my team, her name's Melissa. She actually set up a bi-weekly cadence for the entire professional services team at Conductor, and we all use it as somewhat of a show and tell. There's no agenda. We just come and everyone's at different levels. Like we have some people who are very, very high level. We have people who are in the middle. We have people who are still learning. But ultimately it's helping us all upskill, and we all learn something every time we do it. And that's just every other week. And then everyone goes off and, does things throughout the next couple of weeks. And then we bring it back and say, hey, listen, here's a new thing that I learned that everyone can use. And it's just this great knowledge share. And I think doing something like that and focusing more on things like that would be really good, for most organizations, just kind of starting out, like get your teams together on a regular cadence, talking about it. And even if you're like at the beginning, someone will always bring something that everyone can learn and apply literally that day in their day to day.
I think it's just seeing like a powerful use case is like, like me and my co-founder Jason, we have like a weekly stand-up where we're meeting. Like part of it, he's the developer of the two of us, and he's always showing me something like cool. Like he just made something where it's basically like a prompt generator, and it's a multi-step phase that actually like feeds like different like data points into the process. And it's so cool and exciting to see something like that makes me want to go out and like build something of my own, right? So it's like I think there's power in actually like getting people together to actually see an actual use case, as opposed to just everyone reading like hypotheticals, theoreticals. It's exciting to see when like someone can actually show you how to make your job faster, better, more efficient with it, as opposed to just the hypotheticals, right?
Absolutely. So in our last 5-6 minutes here, I do want to get to something that I've been using quite a bit, which is like, MCP, right? Like the MCP server, model context protocol, for all you nerds out there. For anyone who doesn't know what an MCP server is, think of it as a universal adapter to connect your data and translate it to a language that Claude, ChatGPT, Copilot, or any LLM will understand, and that you can just use it to connect, like using Conductor as an example, you can connect to your Conductor account through ChatGPT and then just ask it questions instead of having to go through the UI. But really, like when you think about having like an on-call agent, right, like this, right, like via an MCP using Claude, I use Claude. I think it's the best at building things. Chris, I don't know what you use. Like I think most people are using Claude right now to build things. But when we think about that, like I believe that this is the future of our industry, and how and I'm not even talking SEO or AEO. I'm talking software, right? Like a lot of softwares, like, the MCP is going to be a vital part, to people accessing their data and combining it with other data sources. I think it's going to allow people to do like really interesting analyses over multiple data sets that have been virtually impossible or would have taken weeks or months to do, and now will happen in a few minutes. But to me, the MCP and being able to just go and query something instead of having to go through, filter, et cetera, I think this is the future of the software industry, and also a huge boon to the AEO and SEO industry. But Chris, what do you think?
Well, I think it goes back to what you were saying before. Like it just because the MCP, like I haven't even thought about it like this one. It democratizes the entire
Oh yeah.
experience, right? So it's like
Oh
instead
yeah.
of me, like the CMO or VP, it's like I have to go into like 4 different softwares: Google Analytics, Search Console, Conductor, and learn their user interfaces and learn where to dig around and export and VLOOKUP and like merge. It's like your UI is just ChatGPT. It's just Claude code. It's just whatever LLM you're using. It doesn't change, right? So you have one UI to use, but you have access to all of your different data sources within it. So I think that's one powerful thing is like it just makes it easier for leaders like go in and start using things. That's one. I think the blending of the data sources is also an extremely powerful context for MCP. It's like, it's like, I mean, I have to imagine so you can go and be like, hey, like, look at my traffic in Google Analytics, then like cross-reference that with like the conductor data using their MCP and like, where are we
Exactly.
seeing things like dipping, right? Where traffic's dipping, but like rankings look good, whatever it is, you can go in and do that now. All of a sudden it's like, you can have these like you can have this conversation with like multi layers of your data within that. So I think that's another powerful thing. And I think the third part is like maybe back to our previous point where it's like, how does MCP like actually reshape the org? Because now all of a sudden, like anyone can go in, even someone who's like, I hate GA4, I never want to use it again, right? But they can go in and be like, Claude, what's happening with my what was my traffic in the last 30 days?
Yep.
What are rising traffic sources? What are falling traffic sources? Cross-reference it with this data. Like it's an on-call analyst. So like all of a sudden that does kind of shape where it's like now anyone in the org can basically have an on-call analyst with access to all their data. So I think it's kind of these like 3 different layers, right? Of like easy to find, on-call marketer, right? Like these types of things. So I think that's one of the interesting use cases of MCP. I also think maybe even just going back from an AEO perspective, it's like I think the softwares and tools that will win in the AEO space probably will have MCPs, right? Because if you're asking Claude Code to build something, it's probably going to recommend something with an MCP with like better API usage limits, those types of things. So it's like I also think that is like an AEO play in and of itself too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like what you said is like, if you're a marketing leader, think about that. Like, what's the hardest thing? It's to get adoption across, multiple disciplines, right? And if you say like, hey, like it's always been a challenge for Conductor, like, hey, like there's data in here that social teams can use, that PR teams can use, that executives could see. Now anyone can just connect it to Copilot or to Claude or to ChatGPT and just say, hey, I'm looking to create a video on YouTube about XYZ. Like, what trends are you seeing, or what should I create a video about, right? And that can be a data input now, and they don't have to log in, and that's okay. That's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Again, it democratizes that data. And again, like getting that data, it also comes down to how you get it, right? So I think a big question that a lot of people always have is, how do we move beyond like somewhat like generic prompting and bake AI, into our specific brand workflows? And Chris, I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially if you're talking about using like how do we basically make like an AI process more sophisticated, right? Instead of just like a generic prompt, how do we get a better output from it? I think it's something I've been thinking a lot more, and probably should have been thinking about even more like this for a long time. Is like, but AI is like a lot of it's about like context. The system is
Yep.
only as good as the context you can put it in. Once again, my co-founder, I can't like hype him up enough. He's like taught me this, where it's like when I watch his like Claude code configuration, he's in like for a piece of content, it's not a one-shot prompt of like, hey, let's write this article or whatever. It's like it literally will run through like a multi-step series of like different skill files where it's like, hey, like a piece of personalized content that that we both align on and think is good, right? Brand guidelines, right? And then it runs through these series of steps and then creates the output, right? And I think that's a way, like giving AI systems much better context is a way you can get away from like kind of single shot prompting and get better output. So that's been one of the more eye-opening things for me in kind of the past like 8-9 months.
Yeah, and honestly, I run basically the consulting group at Conductor, and I see a lot of our responsibilities starting to shift from, yes, we're always going to get on the phone and talk about strategy strategy and things like that. But I also think that it's going to be a responsibility of ours to bundle like Claude skills together as an example, right? Like, hey, here's a library of skills that make sense for your team. And that would be different for the content team. That would be different for a PR team. That would be different for a social team, right? And say, like, here's how you use these skills together to create what you're trying to create, like, pretty much the same way every single time. And you can create, again, process around that. If you can't guess, I'm a big process guy. Like, you can create a process around that and say, hey, listen, at this stage, you use these skills. At this stage, you use these skills. At this stage, you use these skills. And that's just a different way of teaching people how to use this, to give them those tools. Because a lot of people are going to say, like, I don't know how to build a skill, or let's face it, a lot of people are lazy. I don't want to build a skill. Like, you give me skills. Totally. Like, and I think that is a big piece of the future here of like where consulting and strategic consulting goes.
Yep, 100%. It's like, I think it like lives at the intersection of that.
Absolutely. And last question before we part ways. It's been a great conversation. So of course, like, marketing leaders, they care about ROI, right? And I think that, like, when you think about how does an AI, kind of co-pilot, like environment like that actually improve software adoption for an enterprise team? Chris, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it improves adoption because it's, once again, it's easier for everyone to access the data, right? So it's like, I think that, like, probably some of the same blockers like you're seeing with Conductor is probably true of like many other enterprise teams. Like, can you get adoption across, right? So that's probably one of the bigger ways I see that happening.
Yeah, and for me, it creates speed, and like speed and agility within your organization. I've been talking about this for years. This will create speed and agility within your organization at a multiplier that I can't even put a number on yet. Because if you get all of your teams using these things, you will be able to experiment more, which means you'll be able to learn more, which means you'll be able to implement more, and that will just snowball over time. And I think that, like, ROI, there's a lot of different types of ROI. Yes, there's money coming into the company, leads, but I also think that productivity is ROI, right? Like, we've made people this much more productive, or we have saved X amount of time internally that we would have spent pivoting data into XYZ, and AI has already provided those cost savings to us. So I think there's many different ways to think about ROI, but again, that will always be somewhat of a debate depending on who you're talking to. And with that, everybody, we are at time. Thank you so much for spending 30 minutes of your valuable time with us. Chris, thank you so much for joining us. Where can people find you?
You can find me. I write research at my blog on the Nective blog as well. You can follow me on LinkedIn. I post around 5 times a week with just different thoughts on SEO, AI search, all that.
Very good. And of course, at Conductor, you can find us at conductor.com. You can find me, if you enjoy my rantings, you can find me, on my monthly webinar 3030, or at Reinhart at conductor.com. Thank you once again, everybody, so much. Chris, you're awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. Everyone go follow Chris on LinkedIn right now. He posts amazing research. You're missing out if you're not following him. And with that, everybody, we thank you once again, and we will see you next time.